questions orales, oral questions. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, the ongoing diplomatic crisis between Canada and China continues, and now it's Canadian canola producers who are paying for this Prime Minister's weakness on the world stage. It's clear that China has no respect for this Prime Minister, and why would they? After clowning around in India and backing down to Donald Trump time and time again, they believe they can walk all over him. China has unfairly jailed 2 Canadians, and now they're blocking canola exports. When will the Prime Minister finally stand up for Canadian interests?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
These hardships are affecting our canola farmers and indeed producers out west. That's why we've been on this issue for the past number of weeks, including in many meetings with various producers, while we keep up our diplomatic efforts to resolve this difference with China. We're going to continue to stand up for Canadian producers, continue to stand up for Canadian farmers, and we will have good news to announce just in the next few days.
Leader of the Opposition.
Well, Mr. Speaker, we're finally making some progress. After the events of this weekend, the Prime Minister at least knows which country we're talking about in Asia. But not only is he not standing up for Canadian interests, he's actually bankrolling Chinese foreign policy by supporting the Asian Infrastructure Bank. That's 256 million taxpayer dollars to curry favor with a government that has jailed Canadians for political reasons and is in violation of international trade rules. So why is the Prime Minister using Canadian tax dollars to bankroll the foreign policy of the government of China?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, as part of the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, Canada joins countries such as Australia, France, Germany, India, Italy, South Korea, and the UK in promoting inclusive global economic growth. Time of rising global trade tension, the Conservative leader suggests as we close our doors to international cooperation. Well, we know that the bank can support lean, clean, green infrastructure investments throughout Asia. To date, the only AIIB investment in China has been to reduce air pollution from the use of coal. We believe in Canadian leadership around the world.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
What I'm suggesting is that this Prime Minister show some backbone and stand up for Canadians in jail in China. To add insult to injury, this Prime Minister has spent billions of taxpayers' dollars on a pipeline he can't get built in Canada, but is funding the Asian Infrastructure Bank directed by China to build pipelines in other countries. Wow. When will this Prime Minister show the government of China that there are consequences for treating Canadians this way and pull the funding from the Infrastructure Bank?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
We've consistently stood up for Canadian jobs and Canadians at home and around the world, and we will continue to. On the issue of getting pipelines built, for 10 years the Conservatives were unable to get pipelines to Tidewater because they didn't understand that the way you get it done is by working with Indigenous communities, by working with environmental concerns. These are the kinds of things we need to do. That is exactly what we're focused on in getting things done the right way after 10 years of neglect by the Conservatives.
Order. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, China is now spending more on its space program than Japan and Russia. Estimate expenditures are $8.4 billion. China is the second to spend money on the military, but the Prime Minister is giving $250 million to China for the Infrastructure Bank. What will it take for the Prime Minister to finally take a stand up to China, and to defend Canadian interests? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Canada promotes a global economic growth alongside many other companies. Trade tensions are on the rise, but the Leader of the Opposition is talking about closing our door to international issues. The bank is lean, clean and green. It's investing in Asia, in some of the most underprivileged countries in the world. To date, the only investment by the AIIB in China sought to reduce air pollution because of the use of coal.
I heard from the honourable member for Cypress Hills Grasslands 4 times during that answer, and obviously he didn't have the floor. I think he's aware of the standing orders that prohibit interruptions. So I invite him not to interrupt in future. Order. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Speaker, whenever the Liberals are in power, they love to rewrite the rules to benefit themselves. Today, we've learned the names of individuals from SNC-Lavalin who gave over $110,000 in illegal campaign contributions to the Liberal Party. When Conservatives were asked for this information, we released it immediately. But the Liberals refused. In fact, they've sat on this information for 3 years. It took investigative reporting to uncover it. Why did the Prime Minister's recent election financing changes not take action to expose this cover-up?
Honourable Prime Minister.
Proper donations to 2 political parties were made over a decade ago. Under my leadership, we have raised the bar on openness and transparency. We were the first party to proactively disclose MP expenses. We opened up the Board of Internal Economy. We ensured that information regarding fundraisers with the Prime Minister, ministers, party leaders, or candidates for leadership be publicly available, and we fully comply with all fundraising and donation rules. Anyone making any political donation is expected to do the same.
The Honourable Member for Burnaby South.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Whether billions to oil companies or massive corporate tax cuts, Liberals and Conservatives choose the powerful over the public. Together, they slash corporate rates an astounding 12 points. And the only reason Paul Martin didn't go any further was because Jack Layton stopped him. This Prime Minister promised to be different, but he's betrayed that promise to Canadians. I believe it's time for us to do better. So will the Prime Minister cancel the $12 million handout to Loblaws and invest that into people instead?
Hear, hear. Order. The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, on this side of the House, we understand that building a strong economy and protecting the environment must go together. We must work with all partners across the country. Private sector has a role to play. Public sector has a role to play as governments across the country, some of them anyway, are leading on putting a price on pollution and ensuring a cleaner future for our children while making it affordable for Canadians. We also need to lean on individuals and consumers as they do their part to protect our environment for future generations. We will not back down from making important investments in fighting climate change right across the board.
If the honourable members for Windsor West and the Minister of Innovation wish to have a conversation, I'm sure there's another place they could do that. I see it can be a pleasant conversation, but I invite them to do that elsewhere.
The Honourable Member for Burnaby South. The government isn't defending people's interest. Here's the record. $12 million to one of the richest corporations, $4.5 billion for a pipeline, $1.6 billion to the oil sector. The Liberals, like the Conservatives, are prioritizing rich corporations. To help people, we need to make different choices. Why are the Liberals refusing to put people first, ahead of their powerful friends? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. I'm very happy to talk about our record. The first thing we did was cut taxes for the middle class and to increase it on the richest people. Then we came forward with the Canada Child benefit that's helping 9 families out of 10 and has lifted over 300,000 children out of poverty across the country. That's part of the 800,000 Canadians who we lifted out of poverty with our investments. In addition, we've seen 900,000 jobs created across the country in the past years, and the lowest unemployment in 40 years. Work remains to be done, but our plan is working.
The
Honourable Member for Burnaby South. Well, when talking about not helping people, once again, the community of Kashechewan is being displaced because of annual flooding. Leadership and children from the community are in Ottawa to urge the government to honour its promise to relocate the community to higher ground. The Liberals promised to do that, but 2 years later, still nothing to help the community. Why are the Liberals refusing to take action to help these people? Mr. Speaker, we understand how difficult it is for the people of Kashechewan who for 17 years who have been relocated because of flooding. The minister met with them today, and since 2016 we have worked in partnership with Kashechewan on their asks to relocate their community to higher ground. The community has identified the place that would be the best for relocation. The work is underway to build a new road, to transfer the land, to design the new community in partnership with Kashechewan. We're going to
For Burnaby South.
Mr. Speaker, there's been some support for families affected by flooding, but sadly, many communities have been left behind. People from Kashechewan are on the Hill today making their voices heard. The government has broken its promise to help them relocate to higher ground, and there was nothing for them in the budget. The Prime Minister must commit, not in just words, but in writing, to a relocation plan with real dollars and real timelines. Will the Prime Minister sign this agreement today so the work can finally truly begin?
Hear, hear.
We have been working with the community of Kashechewan over the past years on relocation. We have made significant commitments, and we understand that needs to be done in partnership. What the community members in Kashechewan have gone through over the past 17 years of relocations is unacceptable, and that's why we are committed to working forward with them. That's why the community identified the location they believe it would be best to relocate to. Work is underway right now to build a new road, to secure the land, to design the new community in partnership every step of the way with the people of Kashechewan.
The honourable member for Milton.
Picking up on a question that the Leader of the Opposition had regarding illegal donations to the Liberal Party of Canada, the Prime Minister would seem to want Canadians think that this is something that happened 10 years ago. I think the most crucial part of the article, Mr. Speaker, is this. On August 5th, 2016, it was the Liberal Party of Canada, it was the Prime Minister who was given the list of names that made the illegal donations and was alerted to the illegal donations. After that, a compliance agreement was signed between SNC-Lavalin and Elections Canada on the basis that SNC-Lavalin promised not to do it again. I'd like to know whether or not there was any communication between the PMO and Elections Canada on this matter.
The Honourable Government House Leader.
As the same article references, these are donations that were made between 2004 and 2009. The Commissioner for Canada Elections conducted investigations into decade-old donations, and actually two recognized parties in this House actually returned those donations. These improper donations of two political parties were made over a decade ago, and what we have done, Mr. Speaker, is ensure that we have even stricter rules around raising funds for political parties to ensure that we have more openness and transparency. This is leadership that the Prime Minister demonstrated well before.
The honourable member for Milton. Order.
2016, the Prime Minister's office became aware of an investigation result showing $110,000 in illegal donations to the Liberal Party of Canada.
From SNC.
Soon thereafter, SNC-Lavalin was offered a compliance agreement to avoid prosecution. We've seen this before. Yeah. We would like to know whether or not there's conversations between the Prime Minister's office, SNC-Lavalin, and Elections Canada in this matter.
Yes or no?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
To note that when it comes to Elections Canada, they are independent of government. Decisions are taken separate from any government. When it comes to the member's question, it is important to note that these were donations that were made between 2004 and 2009. The Commissioner for Canada Elections did do an investigation. When both parties were informed, these donations were returned, and we will always fully comply with fundraising and donation rules. Anyone making political donations is expected to do the same. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
L'honorable député de Mégantic-Clairable.
The honourable member for Mégantic-Clairable.
The Leader of the Opposition, the Prime Minister has finally said yesterday that he might do something in a few days. Our farmers don't have a few days. Right. Many of them have already taken a major hit. This Liberal government talks a lot about standing up for farmers. All they are doing is sitting on their hands. Our farmers need action today. Will the Prime Minister appoint an ambassador, support farmers, and launch a trade complaint against China?
The Honourable Minister of Agriculture.
Mr. Speaker, we have been involved
this matter for 2 months. It didn't take us 6 weeks, like my colleague from Mégantic-L'Érable, to ask a question, and it didn't take us 2 months, like the leader of the opposition, to wake up and smell the canola. We have been working on this file extensively with our partners, with the farmers, with the industry, with the provinces, and we are supporting our very high-quality canola and our very robust inspection system. We are working on this file seriously.
The honourable member for Mégantic-L'Érable. Let's get serious. We've asked for 9 times. We've asked for an emergency debate. 9 times they said no. That's a reality, Mr. Speaker. People are fed up with the Liberals' wait-and-see approach. For 2 months, they've been waiting for action. The Minister of Agriculture has been waiting for more than a month on a simple request for a technical delegation. And yesterday, the Prime Minister said, wait a few more days. Enough is enough. Delays are costing producers. It's time to take action. When will the Prime Minister stop thinking that this crisis will fix itself and finally listen to these urgent calls from canola producers? The Honourable Minister. Mr. Speaker, for 2 months, we've been working diligently on resolving this file with our colleagues, our provincial counterparts, producers. We have had discussions, video conferences with the Food Inspection Agency as well, and counterparts. We are working tirelessly on this issue. The member for Mégantic-L'Érable has been calling for emergency debates, but it took him 6 weeks before he asked a question. On Thursday, I will be before the Committee of the Agriculture on this important issue. I would ask the honourable member for Mégantic-L'Érable to not yell in the chamber.
The honourable member for Durham.
Mr. Speaker, earlier today we learned that another Canadian has been sentenced to death by the Chinese state. He's the second one to receive the death penalty after Mr. Schellenberg's 15-year sentence was converted to the death penalty a few months ago. All Canadians remain very concerned about the ongoing detention of Mr. Corvig and Mr. Spaver. When will the minister nominate a new ambassador to start turning around this deepening crisis with China?
Honourable Minister of Foreign Affairs.
Mr. Speaker, let me thank the honourable member for his question and address the case of Fan Wei. I want to assure him and his family that Canada is extremely concerned by this sentence. Canada is firmly opposed to the death penalty. Everywhere in the world, it is cruel and inhumane. Obviously, we are particularly concerned where it is applied against Canadians. We are very seized of this matter. Thank you.
Honourable member for Durham.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and the minister's answer shows why we need an ambassador right away. Now, yesterday she said she could predict my questions, so I guess she knows what I'm going to say next. The Prime Minister last week called the Canadians detained by the Chinese state hostages. Without an ambassador, we have no hostage negotiator. So I'm asking the minister, does she agree with the Prime Minister's description of the Canadians detained in China as hostages?
Honourable Minister of Foreign Affairs.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister and I agree about pretty much everything. Let me say, when it comes to the detained Canadians, this is...
Order. Minister of Foreign Affairs has the floor, and today I'm going to make sure I return it to her.
Thank you. And I do want to say to the honourable members opposite, these are people's lives. Yes. This is not a subject for heckling or raillery. I take the detention of these 2 Canadians extremely seriously. I am in very close touch with their families. These are 2 very, very brave Canadians supported by wonderful families. We need to stand with them.
The honourable member for Hamilton Mountain.
Mr. Speaker, this government's talking points are not reassuring steelworkers who are in Ottawa today to finally get some clear answers from the Liberals. The Liberals just don't seem to understand the urgency in protecting the steel industry and these good local jobs. Thousands of steelworkers have been left exposed after the Liberal government let steel safeguards expire last week. It's not complicated. The European Union has already put in place permanent safeguards to protect their workers. Why can't Canadian steelworkers count on the Liberal government to do the same for them?
Honourable Minister of Finance.
I'd like to be very clear. Canadian steelworkers can count on this government. We will support steelworkers. We will support the steel industry. We did receive the CITT report last week identifying that in 2 cases out of 7, safeguards were absolutely required. We've also said that we will continue to look at this issue together with the industry, together with the workers, to make sure that we protect our industry in an appropriate fashion. We've set an aggressive timeline to do so. We are looking at multiple measures that we think can be in support of the industry, and we will firmly be in support of that industry as we move through this process.
Honourable member for Essex.
The one thing you could have done, you didn't. Well, another day in Ottawa and another way Liberals are disrespecting the independence of our...
I have to, of course, remind the honourable member to direct her comments to the chair, and when she says you, I think she's referring to me. Order. The honourable member for Essex has the floor.
Well, another day in Ottawa, another way the Liberals are disrespecting the independence of our court systems. Let's look at their record. SNC-Lavalin, interference with the Attorney General, leaking of judges' personal information. Liberals don't want to investigate. Snooping on judicial candidates. Let's check our Liberal database to see how good a Liberal they are. Yeah. When Canadians go to court, they need to know that judges are impartial, not whether they donated to the Liberals or had a big red Liberal line sign. Canadians deserve a government that takes the rule of law seriously. Simple question, will Liberals stop running candidates through their private database?
The Honourable Minister of Justice.
Taken significant steps to ensure that the process for appointing judges is transparent and accountable to Canadians. Our new process is effective, Mr. Speaker. We've made almost 300 appointments since taking office. The diversity of these candidates is unprecedented. 55% of these judicial appointments or elevations are women. Mr. Speaker, we'll continue to focus on merit-based appointments that create the highest quality, most representative bench in Canadian history.
The honourable member for Richmond Arthabaska. Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister broke his promise to balance the budget. Instead, he continued with irresponsible spending. This Liberal government has spent more than $250 million in an Asian infrastructure bank, not in Canada, in China. To do what? Build pipelines and roads in China. Mr. Speaker, when will the Prime Minister stop wasting Canadians' money in China?
Ministre des Finances.
The Honourable Minister. Mr. Speaker, the truth is that we are investing in the Asian Infrastructure Bank with other countries. It's very important to have a bank that will help countries facing significant challenges. At present, we know that to date there is one investment in China by the bank, and it is an investment to improve the environment. So that is very important. At the same time, we have to continue working with other countries to improve the global economy. That is very important for Canada as well. The Honourable Member for Richmond Arthabaska. Mr. Speaker, here are the facts. More than 40% of the Canada infrastructure budget wasn't invested at home in our provinces and in our municipalities. What's more, the Prime Minister, who confuses China and Japan, is wasting money in Canadians' money in the Asian Infrastructure Bank in China. My question is simple. Can the Prime Minister explain why, when we have urgent needs here at home in Canada, he's spending Canadians' money in China? The Honourable Minister of Infrastructure. I'd like to thank my colleague opposite for his question, Mr. Speaker. We are investing in Canada. At present, we have 4.7 thousand projects for roads, for infrastructure projects in our communities to make this country greener, Mr. Speaker. Canadians watching us from home, they know that this government will always be there to invest in infrastructure of the 21st century that will be more modern, more green and more resilient. The Conservatives have voted against all of these measures. We are going to continue to invest for Canadians.
The Honourable Member for Carleton.
The Foreign Minister has announced a massive diplomatic breakthrough with China. That country's leaders have given the Prime Minister the nickname Little Potato. And in order to reciprocate that gift, he provided them with $250 million of Canadian tax money in the form of a contribution to the Asian Infrastructure Bank. That's no small potatoes even for this spend-happy Prime Minister. Will this government finally show some respect for taxpayers and cancel this waste of money?
Honourable Minister of Finance.
Speaker, one of the things that we know is that the environment is global. One of the things we know is that the Asian Infrastructure Bank has made one investment in China, and that is to help China get off coal so they can actually reduce pollution. What we also know is that the Asian Infrastructure Bank is going to make investments in less developed countries, investments that are going to help our global economy. We happen to understand that the Canadian economy is part of the global economy. So we will continue to work with other nations to make sure that we enhance our global economy and do it while also enhancing our environment.
The Honourable Member for Carleton.
To get them off coal, and yet just yesterday, Edward Cunningham, a specialist on China and energy markets at Harvard University, indicated that China is investing in 300 new coal-fired plants. That's after the $250 million handout that this Prime Minister is giving China through the Asian Infrastructure Bank. Our tax dollars for China. Now, Mr. Speaker, if this is really about getting off coal, how many tons of coal will the Chinese burn in the next decade?
The Honourable Minister of Finance.
We will continue to support an international effort to look at international development banks around the world. These banks, what are they intended to do? They are intended to help countries that are facing significant economic challenges to address and meet those challenges for the future. That is something that we will continue to do. The Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank is an important development bank, one that's helping countries across Asia, and we are proud to work together with like-minded countries, as the Prime Minister mentioned, like Australia, like Germany, in helping to make sure that we get
Order. The Honourable Member for North Island Powell River.
Mr. Speaker, veterans are tired of waiting for services. Liberals have still not hired enough case managers to meet the needs of veterans in a timely manner. The case managers are essential as they serve as a first point of contact, key for the severely disabled veterans who face significant red tape. The ratio of case managers falls short of the Liberals' promise. Veterans should have access to the benefits they are entitled to for serving our country. When will the promised amount of case managers finally be hired?
Honourable Minister of Veterans Affairs.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My honourable colleague is well aware the previous Conservative government gutted the funding in Department of Veterans Affairs. In fact, when they were done, there was only 190 caseworkers. Because of our investment in 2015, now there's well over 400 caseworkers at Veterans Affairs. And in fact, we say yes to veterans when they come forward to help, which means that there's over a 60% increase in applications. Yes, Mr. Speaker, we have and we will continue to support veterans in this country.
The Honourable Member for Drummond. Mr. Speaker, the Liberals don't have anything to teach us when it comes to the environment. They've maintained subsidies to oil companies, and they bought an old pipeline for $4.5 billion. That's not what leadership looks like. The NDP has a bold and concrete plan greening residences to make them more energy efficient. Not only will this reduce greenhouse gas emissions, our plan will create high-quality jobs and help families save a lot of money. When will the government understand that it's possible to fight climate change while working to help real people?
Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Environment.
Mr. Speaker, for the opportunity to point out to the member that the things the NDP is talking about doing now, we started doing several years ago. I know just this past year I made an announcement in Nova Scotia that would see energy efficiency measures implemented to not only make residential homes more efficient, but save monies for residents by having their power bill come down every month. This is one of over 50 measures that makes up our plan for to fight climate change, including putting a price on pollution, investing in public transit to an extent we've never seen in the history of our country, investing in energy efficiency. Over 50 measures that are going to make a real difference, help us transition to a clean economy and make life more affordable.
Honourable Member for Hamilton East Stony Creek.
Mr. Speaker, more and more communities need our help adapting to the severe weather events that are being caused by climate change. And reducing the impact of natural disasters such as flooding is critical to keeping Canadian families safe, protecting local business, and supporting a strong economy in the middle class. In my hometown of Hamilton, this is particularly true. So can the Minister of Infrastructure and Communities update the House on what the government is doing to build climate resilience in cities like Hamilton?
Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I want to thank the member for his question and his many years of being a champion for Hamilton. Our government is committed to helping communities to build the infrastructure they need to better withstand natural hazards, including floods. This is why we're investing $2 billion over 10 years through the Disaster Mitigation and Adaptation Fund. Recently, I was in Hamilton to announce an investment of over $12 million towards a shoreline protection project. Mr. Speaker, we will continue to invest in Canadians. They know they can count on us, and we'll continue to be there for them. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Louis Saint Laurent. Mr. Speaker, all across the country, the voices are rising against Bill C-69. This bill is bad for the Canadian economy, it's bad for resource development, and bad for federal-provincial relationships. Not long ago, the Minister of Natural Resources in Quebec condemned the law, saying that it would expand the powers given to the federal government, that it would duplicate administrative procedures, and they said that it's a real obstacle for developers. Why fight reasonable natural resource development?
Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, to the contrary, the piece of legislation the honourable member points to is designed to ensure that good projects go ahead and that we understand the consequences of bad projects so we can prevent them. This is about making sure that we pay attention to Indigenous peoples to understand their perspective when we're assessing projects, and making sure that we fully understand the environmental consequences as projects go forward. Perhaps the Conservatives' failed record on the economy is because they didn't take the process of environmental assessment serious for 10 years in power. Mr. Speaker, this is not an anti-jobs bill. In fact, the Mining Association of Canada is behind this piece of legislation. It's designed to make sure a good project can go ahead in an expeditious way.
Member for Kamloops, Thompson, Caribou.
Mr. Speaker, gases are sky high in Vancouver, reaching $1.70 a litre and more. Analysts believe that the construction of the Trans Mountain Pipeline will ease a chronic shortage and force prices down. A year ago, this government bought the pipeline and they promised immediate construction. Last week, the minister mused, well, maybe not until after the next election. Wow. Immediate means without delay, done at once, instant. They spent $4.5 billion on a pipeline. Can they tell us when will construction begin?
The Minister of Natural Resources.
Mr. Speaker, if the members of the official opposition and the honourable member are really serious about getting this project continue in the right way, they would not have voted to defund and kill the meaningful consultation that we have undertaken with Indigenous communities. We are focused on moving forward on this project in the right way with meaningful consultation with Indigenous communities, listening to their concerns and offering accommodations, and where accommodation is not possible, being very transparent why accommodation is not possible. Our goal is to make a decision on this project by...
The Honourable Member for Lakeland.
Mr. Speaker, it's been over 11 months since the Prime Minister said, quote, we're going to get that pipeline built. But Canadians didn't know what he meant was spending $250 million Canadian tax dollars for the Asian Infrastructure Bank to build pipelines in China. And when the Liberals spent $4.5 billion tax dollars to buy the Trans Mountain Pipeline, they promised construction on the expansion would start, quote, immediately. Delaying a decision past June will cost taxpayers even more. When will the Trans Mountain expansion be built?
Minister of Natural Resources. Following the guidelines of the Federal Court of Appeal in order to ensure that we are moving forward on this project in the right way with meaningful consultation with Indigenous communities. Those consultations are going really well. We have met with more than 100 communities. We have issued a draft consultation and accommodation report for Indigenous communities to consider, and our goal is to make a decision on this project by June 18th. I will remind the honourable member again, if they're really serious about this project, they should not have voted to defund and kill that process.
But for Lakeland.
Look, Mr. Speaker, Canadians want the Liberals to invest their tax dollars in our own country, in Canada, and to get Canadian resources to market, not to build pipelines in Asia. The Liberals deliberately killed 2 export pipelines already, and not a single inch of new pipeline is in service in Canada. And there are no more pipelines. Bill C-69, it'll guarantee none will be proposed in Canada ever again. So my question is very simple, and the minister should answer. When will the Trans Mountain expansion be built?
Minister of Natural Resources. The honourable member is absolutely wrong. We have built and approved Nova Gas Pipeline. We are the government that gave approval to Enbridge Line 3 that has been fully completed on the Canadian side. We are the government that is advocating for moving forward on Keystone XL pipeline. We are advocating for the U.S. government. That's right. We are the government that invested $4.5 billion to save a pipeline from falling apart, the investment that Conservative Party voted against, Mr. Speaker. We are moving forward on this project in the right way, and our goal is to make a decision on this project by June 18th.
Honourable member for Vancouver East.
Amnesty International raised the alarm about the Liberal shift of public policy to cater to the alt-right. In Central and South America, sexual violence is rampant. Children as young as 7 are faced with forced recruitment. Yet the alt-right is vilifying refugees. They call it white nationalism. The Minister of Border Security is feeding into it by calling refugees asylum shoppers. With Bill C-97, they can't even apply for protection in Canada. If the Liberals have the courage to stand by the right to the move, will they table those changes as a standalone bill in this House?
The Honourable Minister of Border Security.
Well, Mr. Speaker, later on today I'll have the opportunity to meet with Amnesty International and provide them with assurances that our government remains committed to a fair and compassionate refugee system that will provide protection to those who need it most. But, Mr. Speaker, I also can assure them that no person will be turned away if they are deemed to be at risk, and no one will be removed without an opportunity to be heard.
The Honourable Member for Berthier-Maskinongé. Mr. Speaker, I want to thank all the volunteers, soldiers, police officers, firemen, and everyone else who's been helping those affected by the flooding across Canada. In my riding of Berthier-Maskinongé, the situation is really difficult. With climate change, these natural disasters will only become more frequent. The federal government has set up a $200 million fund to map flood zones. But so far, Quebec hasn't asked for a single cent of that amount. Will the federal government commit to working with the provinces to ensure that the program will meet their needs and that the money will remain available? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Safety.
This has been a program that the honourable member refers to that's been in existence over the last 4 or 5 years. It's coming to the final stages of its original term. We obviously have to examine with provinces what are the next steps that are necessary. I agree with her that flood mapping and so proper zoning decisions can be taken, proper infrastructure decisions can be taken. That is vitally important, and we will work with all of our partners to make sure that appropriate resources and collaboration are available.
The Honourable Member for Thornhill.
Mr. Speaker, the Liberals have been caught again peddling cash for access to the Prime Minister and the Minister of Innovation. In fact, it was a double violation of the Liberals' own law because it involved a gifted ticket, illegal, given to the CEO of an American cannabis company, again, illegal access, for an American who boasted online of his privileged access to pitch medical marijuana technology. Now, Mr. Speaker, if the Prime Minister can't abide and respect his own ethical guidelines, why won't he respect the laws of Canada?
Honourable Minister of Democratic Institutions.
As the member opposite well knows, this Parliament passed Bill C-50, which provides greater transparency for fundraising events that include the Prime Minister, ministers of the government, as well as leaders of all of the parties represented in the House of Commons. This party, in fact, began to disclose that information even before the bill began to take effect. However, the party opposite did not. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
For Thornhill.
Well, Mr. Speaker, the Liberal excuses clearly don't wash. This is clearly yet another case of cash for access, another shameless Liberal claim that exposure of each of these illegal donations to the Liberal Party somehow proves Liberal transparency and accountability. Mr. Speaker, this is Monty Python logic.
All up in smoke.
And the Liberal ethical parrot is clearly dead. Mr. Speaker, why is it so difficult for the Prime Minister to keep promises and respect the law?
Hear, hear. The Honourable Minister of Democratic Institutions.
Mr. Speaker, on this side of the House, we believe that transparency is a good thing. In fact, that is why we introduced Bill C-50 to provide greater clarity and greater transparency for Canadians. So Canadians could clearly identify when fundraising events were taking place, whether it was with the Prime Minister, ministers, or leaders of the opposition. And it's important that they can also see who attended those events. Mr. Speaker, we believe that's important. We've delivered for Canadians, and we hope that all parties in the House will do that as well. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Lévis-Lotbinière. Mr. Speaker, in the ongoing saga of Liberal cronyism and specially awarded contracts that we heard about from the Globe and Mail and La Presse, we've learned that there was a private discussion between the law firm and the Deputy Minister in question on August 14, 2017, in the concerned consultation services. Surprise, surprise, the devoted Liberal Party donor was awarded a consulting contract that was specially tailored to their skills. Mr. Speaker, can the Minister confirm the nature of the confidential discussion between the law firm McCarthy-Tétrault and the Deputy Minister of Justice on August 14th, 2017? The Honourable Minister of Justice. Mr. Speaker, the Minister of Justice approves these processes, although many processes are delegated to the Deputy Minister and other senior officials. In the case of these two contracts, one was approved by my predecessor and the other was approved by the Deputy Minister. And the rules and policies for contract approval were followed when these two contracts were awarded. The Honourable Member for Mississauga Lakeshore.
Mr. Speaker, where the Conservatives stepped back, we promised to step up and re-engage on the world stage, and we're doing just that. Canada is proudly acting on our NATO commitments to Latvia and Iraq, and we're supporting the peace process.
Order. I know members are enjoying question period today, but we need to hear the question. I need to hear both the questions and the answers so I can hear whether there's some reach with the rules. Order. The honourable member for, I'd ask you to start over. The honourable member for Mississauga Lakeshore.
We're proudly acting on our NATO commitments in Latvia and Iraq, and we're supporting the peace process in Mali by providing life-saving medical evacuations to UN peacekeepers. Could the Minister of National Defence please inform this House how, in addition to these efforts, our government has recently been contributing to international peace and security in the Middle East? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Minister.
Lakeshore for this question and his service with the United Nations in the Middle East. Mr. Speaker, our government is helping to build long-term stability in the Middle East. In 2017, I announced our support for the construction and rehabilitation of a road along Jordan's northern border with Syria. Last week, I was in the region and proud to say that this project is underway. Through this project, we are bolstering the security of Jordan, an important security ally in the region. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable Member for Carlton Trail, Eagle Creek.
Mr. Speaker, most Canadians don't live the privileged life of the Prime Minister with 24/7 access to a government jet to fly him around for weekend cross-country surfing trips. For middle-class Canadians, the Liberals' carbon tax is projected to add up to $600 on the cost of a flight for a family of 4. Why is the Prime Minister forcing regular Canadians to pay exorbitant prices while making the Canadian taxpayers cover his own vacation costs?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Environment.
This government's mission from day one has been to ensure that we create an economy that works for everyone and not just for the wealthy few. I question why the honourable member, when she had the opportunity to support the middle-class tax cut, instead voted against it. I'm curious as to when the Canada Child Benefit was on the floor of the House of Commons and put more money in the pockets of 9 out of 10 Canadian families and stopped sending childcare checks to millionaires, she voted against it. And I can't help but point out that I've not received one question from a Conservative MP asking us to take more action on climate change. Mr. Speaker, we have to work to make sure the economy works for everyone and we can protect the environment at the same time. The Conservatives should get on board.
The Honourable Member for Courtenay Alberni.
Mr. Speaker, decades of Liberal and Conservative mismanagement of our fisheries has left Chinook salmon populations in a desperate situation. We need action now, but the Liberals just keep re-announcing the same funding they promised for restoration and lost habitat protections. But the money's not flowing to support local fishers and communities affected by fisheries closures. And go figure, Liberals can find $12 million for Loblaws and $4.5 billion for their leaky pipeline. What are they waiting for? When will this government stop making coastal communities pay for their mistakes?
Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Fisheries. Motion.
Mr. Speaker, our government believes in environmental sustainability and economic growth, that they must go hand in hand. In partnership with the provincial government, we created the BC Salmon Restoration and Innovation Fund, which our government will contribute $100 million over 5 years. With provincial funding of over $42 million, we're also proposing $5 million in funding the Pacific Salmon Endowment Fund. Our government will continue to ensure that resources are managed sustainably and protected wisely to our children and grandchildren can benefit for years to come.
The Honourable Member for Thérèse de Blainville. Mr. Speaker, it's always been suspicious that the Conservatives would promise restrictions without giving any details, but now we know why they don't want to share their plan. The Conservatives recently published a tax guide with various information that was misleading. Their guide included tax credits for the rich, and it doesn't mention the Canada Child Benefit. Can the Minister of Families, Children and Social Development reassure this House that the current government does not intend to adopt the Conservative plan to end the Canada Child Benefit? The Honourable Minister. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you to the member for Thérèse de Blainville for his hard work. In 2015, Canadians made the right choice when they had to choose between the Conservative plan to help millionaire families and the Liberal plan to help middle-class families. In 2016, we set up the CCB, which has lifted 300,000 people, children out of poverty. It's unfortunate that Conservative members are trying to hide the existence of the CCB and are trying to deprive some families of it. It's very unfortunate. The Honourable Member for Chicoutimi-Le-Fjord. Mr. Speaker, the Liberals signed a new agreement, a free trade agreement, with even though steel and aluminum tariffs are still in place. Then the Liberals imposed their own counter tariffs, but their makeshift plan didn't work. Around 86% of Chinese aluminum imports enter the U.S. tariff-free, but in Canada it's less than 1%. When will the government defend our steel and aluminum workers? And why do Chinese companies have better access to the U.S. market than we do? The Honourable Minister of Foreign Affairs. Mr. Speaker, the illegal and unfair American tariffs need to be lifted. That is the message that we have constantly sent to the U.S., and it has been heard. For example, yesterday I spoke with Senator Chuck Grassley, the chair of the Senate Finance Committee in the U.S., and he wrote yesterday in the Wall Street Journal that if these tariffs are not lifted, the new NAFTA deal will be dead. We don't want to debate a new NAFTA, so that is the Republican senator who wrote that.
Député de Rivière-du-Nord.
The Honourable Member for Rivière-du-Nord. Mr. Speaker, apparently before they appoint a judge, this government runs potential appointees through their database to see if they're good liberals. The result? Well, it works. 91% of political donations made by judges went to the liberals. 91%. They collected over $300,000 that way, Mr. Speaker. The liberal database should be called Sponsorship 2.0. A crony is a crony. It was true under Jean Chrétien, it's still true. Perhaps that's the reason that the government won't change the system for political donations. The Honourable Minister of Justice. Mr. Speaker, we set up a system where judges are selected through a transparent and merit-based process. Mr. Speaker, we will continue to appoint judges through this rigorous process, and we will continue to have a bench that reflects the diversity and the high quality of Canadian society. The Honourable Member for Rivière-du-Nord. Capping political donations at $500 and making the funding reflect the party's share of votes would reduce lobbyist influence over the government. Obviously, they don't want that. It would also have the benefit of preventing people from making donations under other people's names, which is a practice we've gotten used to under the Liberals and Conservatives. It would also avoid having judges appointed because they've given $300,000 to the Liberals. We're fed up with this cronyism, Mr. Speaker. Voters have a right to a fair democratic process and fair public funding of political parties. What is this government waiting for to take action? Are they waiting for bloc members to give them money, Mr. Speaker? The Honourable Minister of Democratic Institutions. In this country, there is a limit to annual donations. Individuals cannot donate more than $1,600 to a political party or a candidate. That's extremely important. The rules are clear and they are effective.
For Calgary Skyview.
Yesterday, the Hill Times published a disturbing article referencing a potential trend in our political system, which I cannot abide by. This is, of course, the use of racism as a political tool, Mr. Speaker. I find the stats on this subject extremely alarming, including the fact that we have seen a nearly 50% increase in hate crimes from 2016 to 2017 across the country. Can the Minister of Public Safety update this House on the steps the government is taking to properly arrest these disturbing revelations?
Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, there can be no room for hate, not in Canada. The RCMP and other Canadian police forces investigate and lay charges wherever possible. We have also quadrupled the security infrastructure program to help religious and cultural organizations to protect themselves. We're funding critical research into ultra-right-wing, white supremacist and neo-Nazi violent extremism. We identified this issue in the latest public threat report, and we have raised it at the Five Eyes and G7 allies meetings to build international coordination against racism and hate. We intend to be the finest example of pluralism the world has ever seen.